The dust hadn't settled, yet when the fourth man finally understood what the other three already knew, he was outmatched. Completely, utterly, impossibly outmatched. 3 bodies lay sprawled in the New Mexico dirt, groaning through broken pride and bruised ribs. The fourth stood frozen, his hand hovering near his gun, but lacking the courage to draw it. Smart man. Drawing would have been the last mistake he ever made. She stood in the center of the road like a mountain that had suddenly decided to take human form. Nahimana. The name meant mystic in her language, though the settlers who'd heard of her used different words. Giant. Monster. The Apache devil woman. She stood 6'4" in her bare feet, broader across the shoulders than most men, with arms that looked like they'd been carved from the red stone of the canyon walls behind her. But it wasn't her size that made grown men turn their horses around and find another route. It was the way she moved. Fluid. Inevitable. Like water cutting through stone over centuries, patient and unstoppable. She hadn't even picked up a weapon. Hadn't needed to. These four had come looking for trouble, looking to be the ones who finally put the Apache woman in her place, looking to prove that no woman, no matter how big, could stand against real men. They'd found their answer. It just wasn't the answer they'd wanted. Nahimana's chest rose and fell with easy breaths. Not even winded. She wore traditional Apache clothing mixed with pieces she'd taken from defeated challengers over the years. A leather vest over a simple shirt. Buckskin pants reinforced at the knees. Boots that had walked 1,000 miles of this harsh country. And around her neck, hanging against her collarbone, was an amulet. Simple. A small piece of turquoise wrapped in silver wire on a leather cord. She'd found it 3 seasons ago near the river and wore it because something about it felt right. Felt protective. Like her grandmother was still watching over her somehow. The fourth man finally found his voice. His survival instinct overriding his pride. We're leaving. We're leaving now. Nahimana said nothing. Just watched. Let them scramble for their scattered supplies, their dignity left behind in the dust. Let them run. Fear worked better than violence anyway. These men would tell others what they'd seen. How the Apache woman guarded the canyon passage. How no man could match her. How trying meant humiliation at best, broken bones at worst. She'd built this reputation deliberately, brick by brick, challenger by challenger. Turned herself into a living barrier between her people and the endless stream of settlers who thought Apache land was theirs for the taking. She'd been doing this for 3 years now. 3 years of standing in this same spot, turning back anyone who tried to cross through the sacred canyon. 3 years of hearing the same challenges, the same insults, the same threats. 3 years of proving, again and again, that she was exactly as strong as the stories claimed. 3 years of being utterly, completely alone. The men disappeared around the bend, their horses kicking up dust in their desperate retreat. Nahimana bent to gather the supplies they'd abandoned. Might be something useful. Settlers often carried things her tribe could trade for. She was sorting through a pack when she felt it. That pressure on her skin that meant someone was watching. She'd known for the past 10 minutes, actually. Had sensed the presence on the ridge above like heat radiating from stone. Most people didn't realize how much noise they made just by existing. Their horses shifted weight. Leather creaked. Breath disturbed the air. She'd learned to read these things the way others read words on a page. She looked up slowly. Let her eyes travel to the ridge line. Found him immediately. A rider. Dark hair, catching the afternoon light. Sitting easy in the saddle, like he'd been born there. And he was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Most men looked away when she met their gaze. This one didn't. He just sat there, still as the rocks around him, watching her the way a person might watch a storm rolling in. Not with fear, exactly. With respect for something powerful. It irritated her more than the other men's aggression had. Royce Barrett had been watching for longer than 10 minutes, actually. He'd been watching since the first man had hit the ground. Had seen every movement of the fight, if you could even call it that. Fight implied 2 sides with a chance. This had been more like a lesson. A master showing students exactly how outclassed they were. But what held his attention wasn't the woman's strength, though that was undeniable. It was the precision, the control. She could have broken bones with those strikes, could have done permanent damage, could have killed them easily. But she hadn't. Every movement had been calculated, measured, just enough force to end the threat without going further. That took more strength than people realized. Not physical strength, the other kind. His hand rested on his horse's neck, keeping the animal calm and quiet. His eyes traced the woman below, the way she moved, the traditional clothing mixed with frontier wear, the amulet around her neck that made his chest tighten with recognition. He couldn't see it clearly from this distance, but something about it pulled at old memories, old grief. When she finally looked up and met his eyes across the space between them, something shifted in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. That charged, electric feeling of potential energy about to become kinetic. She didn't look away. Neither did he. And then she smiled. But it wasn't friendly. It was a challenge. Royce had seen a lot of smiles in his 32 years. Welcoming smiles. Grateful smiles. Flirtatious smiles. Threatening smiles. This was something different. This was a woman who'd spent years proving herself, now looking at another potential challenger and already knowing how it would end. This was confidence earned through repetition. This was power that didn't need to announce itself. He urged his horse down the slope, kept his hands visible, movements slow and deliberate. He'd learned this from his mother, how to approach without threatening, how to show respect without showing weakness. The Apache way of moving through the world with awareness of how your presence affected others. The woman below didn't reach for a weapon, didn't shift into a fighting stance. But her body language changed, became something between ready and waiting, like a spring coiled but not yet released. He could see her more clearly now as he descended, see the scars on her forearms, some ceremonial, some earned in ways that had nothing to do with ritual. See the way she stood with her weight balanced, ready to move in any direction. See the intelligence in her dark eyes as she tracked his approach, already calculating threats and responses. Passage is closed, she called up when he was halfway down the slope. Her English carried only the slightest accent. Educated. Deliberate. Turn back. Can't do that. Royce stopped his horse 20 feet away. Close enough to be heard clearly. Far enough to be respectful. Far enough that she wouldn't feel threatened, though he suspected very little threatened this woman. Got medicine needed in a settlement past the canyon. Children are sick. Not my concern. Figured you'd say that. He dismounted slowly, keeping his eyes on hers. Every movement telegraphed. No surprises. But I'm asking anyway. Not looking for trouble. Trouble found you when you came here. She moved closer, and he noticed she walked with the balls of her feet first. Silent despite her size. A hunter's walk. Every man who crosses this land thinks he has a good reason. You all think your reasons matter more than our sacred ground. Maybe I do. Royce stood his ground as she approached. Didn't step back even as her height advantage became more apparent. She had at least 6 inches on him, maybe more. Maybe children are dying. And your sacred ground is the only path that gets medicine there in time. He saw her jaw tighten, saw the flicker of something in her eyes that might have been conflict. I'm not asking you to abandon what you protect, he continued. I'm asking you to let mercy pass through. She stopped close enough now that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Close enough to smell sage and smoke on her clothes. Close enough that if she wanted to hit him, he wouldn't have time to react. She studied him with an intensity that felt like being read in a language most people couldn't see. His posture, his breathing, the way his hand hung near his belt but not on the gun there. The calluses on his palms that told stories about how he'd lived. You're different from the others, she said finally. It didn't sound like a compliment. That makes you more dangerous. Or less. We'll see. She turned her back on him deliberately. An insult or a test, he wasn't sure which. Maybe both. You can try to pass, she said over her shoulder. But first you prove you're strong enough. Royce looked at her broad shoulders. The easy way she carried herself. Remembered the 3 men in the dust. Not interested in fighting you. That made her stop. She turned back slowly, surprise crossing her features before suspicion replaced it. Every man wants to prove himself against me. I'm not every man. Then what are you? He met her eyes steadily. Someone who knows there's more than one kind of strength. The words hung between them, charged with something neither quite understood yet. Nahimana felt frustration rise in her chest. He was supposed to challenge her, supposed to give her a reason to send him away like all the others. His refusal to follow the script threw her off balance in a way physical combat never did. You don't get to pass because you have a clever tongue, she said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Didn't think I would. He gestured to the scattered supplies the other men had left behind. But while we're talking, mind if I look at what those men left? Might be something useful. She watched him crouch near the abandoned packs. Watched his hands move through them with quick efficiency. The hands of someone who'd lived rough, who knew the value of every item. When he pulled out a water skin and offered it to her first before drinking himself, something in her chest twisted uncomfortably. This was going to be more complicated than she'd thought. The canyon walls rose on either side like the ribs of some ancient giant, casting long shadows across the path. Nahimana had been sorting through the supplies in silence, hyper-aware of the man doing the same nearby. He moved with competence. No fumbling. No wasted motion. Most men she encountered moved through the world like it owed them something. This one moved like he'd learned to take nothing for granted. Where did you learn Apache manners? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Royce looked up, squinting against the sun behind her. My mother. She lived with the Chiricahua for 3 years before I was born. Taught me that respect isn't the same as submission. The answer surprised her. She'd expected evasion or lies. Men usually gave her one or the other. Your mother was captured. Taken in, he corrected, standing and dusting off his hands. She was sick, dying probably. They found her on the edge of their territory and chose mercy over suspicion. She never forgot that. Nahimana felt the ground shift slightly under her assumptions about him. She looked more closely at the amulet around her own neck, at the turquoise stone wrapped in silver wire. That stone, Royce said quietly, his eyes fixed on her throat. Where did you get it? Found it. Her hand moved to cover it instinctively. Why? My mother made one like it. Gave it to someone who saved her life during the fever. A healer. His voice had gone distant. She died 2 winters ago. I've been looking for that healer ever since. To thank them. To tell them she never stopped being grateful. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Nahimana's grandmother had been the tribe's healer. Had been, until she passed during that same winter Royce mentioned. The timing made her skin prickle with awareness. Not of anything mystical, but of the way small moments in different lives could intersect without anyone knowing until much later. The healer who wore that amulet is gone, Nahimana said finally. She was my grandmother. Royce's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for her to name them all. Grief. Recognition. Something that looked almost like relief. Then she raised you. She taught me strength. Taught me that we protect what matters, no matter the cost. She taught my mother that too. He took a step closer, and Nahimana noticed he didn't ask permission. Didn't treat her space like it needed to be negotiated. Said the strongest people are the ones who know when to fight and when to heal. Those men earlier didn't need healing. They needed a lesson. She heard the defensive edge in her own voice. And I gave them one. You did. But you didn't break any bones. Didn't do permanent damage. You could have. His eyes held hers. Which makes me think you're already stronger than you need to prove. Which makes me think you're proving something to yourself, not to them. The words hit like a palm strike to the chest. Unexpected. Accurate. Infuriating. Nahimana felt anger rise hot in her throat. You know nothing about me. I know your grandmother raised you to be more than just a fighter. He gestured to the canyon behind her. I know she'd want you to let medicine through to save children, because that's who she was. Don't you dare use her memory to manipulate me. Not manipulation. Truth. He didn't back down from her anger. Didn't flinch when she moved into his space, using her height to intimidate. You can send me back. You can make me find another route that'll take 3 more days. But you'll know what choice you made. And you'll know why. They stood close enough now that she could see a small scar above his left eyebrow. Could count the different shades of brown in his eyes. His breath was steady despite her proximity, despite the implied threat of her size. Most men would have stepped back by now. He stayed exactly where he was, neither advancing nor retreating, just present in a way that made her heart beat faster for reasons that had nothing to do with combat readiness. One night, she said through her teeth, "You camp here tonight. Tomorrow I decide if you pass." Fair enough. And you don't touch anything. Don't wander. Don't test my patience. Understood. She should have walked away then. Should have put distance between them. Should have used the night to reinforce all the reasons why letting him through was weakness. Instead, she found herself still standing there, caught in the gravity of his steady gaze, in the way he treated her anger like weather to acknowledge rather than a storm to flee from. "Why do you really need to pass through?" she asked, her voice lower now, genuinely curious. "The truth this time." "I told you the truth. Children sick with fever. Settlement 5 days northwest if I go around. 2 days if I go through." He paused, and something painful crossed his face. "I watched my sister die of fever when I was 12. Watched my mother hold her and pray and beg while she burned up from the inside. If I can stop that from happening to someone else, I will. Every time. No matter what stands in my way." Nahimana heard the bedrock certainty in his words, the kind of conviction that came from old wounds that never quite healed. She recognized it because she carried the same kind. Losses that shaped you, that made you draw lines in the dust and dare the world to cross them. "Make your camp by the rocks," she said abruptly, turning away before he could see whatever expression had taken over her face. "Stay visible. I'll be watching." As she walked toward the canyon's edge, she could feel his eyes on her back. Not threatening, not predatory, just aware. The way you were aware of a storm approaching or fire crackling nearby. Something powerful that demanded attention. She didn't know yet that watching him would be the beginning of the end of every wall she'd built. Didn't know that by morning she'd have to choose between the person she'd made herself into and the person her grandmother had hoped she'd become. But somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the armor of muscle and reputation, something whispered that this cowboy with sad eyes and steady hands was about to change everything. The scream cut through the evening air like a blade through cloth. Royce was on his feet before conscious thought, hand already reaching for his rifle. Training from years of frontier living taking over. Find the threat. Assess the danger. Move toward those who need help. Nahimana materialized from the shadows near the canyon wall, running toward the sound with a speed that shouldn't be possible for someone her size. He followed without hesitation. Horse forgotten. Medicine packs left behind. Instinct driving him toward whoever had made that sound of pure terror and pain. They found the source 50 yards into the canyon. 2 members of Nahimana's tribe trapped beneath a partial rockslide. A young man and an older woman, both pinned under stones that had given way from the canyon wall above. The woman's leg twisted at an angle that made Royce's stomach clench. The young man, pinned from the waist down, was conscious but pale with shock. "Kana," Nahimana breathed, dropping to her knees beside the young man. Her hands moved over the rocks with frantic precision, testing weight, testing stability. "Don't move. Don't try to shift." "Hurts," he gasped. "Grandmother." "Check grandmother." Royce was already there, crouching beside the older woman. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. The leg was bad, clearly broken. But what worried him more was the gray tinge to her lips. The way her pupils were different sizes when he checked them. She hit her head. "We need to move these rocks now." He looked across the space between the trapped victims to where Nahimana knelt. But carefully. Wrong move could bring down more. Nahimana looked at him, and in that moment all pretense of antagonism evaporated. There was only the crisis, only the need, only two people who knew how to act when others would freeze. "You know medicine?" she demanded. "Field medicine. Enough. Then tell me how to move these rocks without killing them." He assessed the situation with the kind of quick calculation that came from years of fixing what could be fixed and accepting what couldn't. The big one on the woman. "We lift together on my count. You're stronger. You take the weight. I'll pull her clear." And the boy? More complicated. Those rocks are supporting each other. We'll need to shore up the gaps before we remove them. Shore up with what? Royce looked around, thinking fast. Wood from my saddle pack. Canvas. Anything that can distribute weight differently. He met her eyes. "But we have to move her first. That head injury won't wait." Nahimana positioned herself at the heaviest boulder. Royce noticed for the first time that her hands were shaking. Barely. Almost imperceptibly. But shaking nonetheless. This wasn't just tribe. This was family. "On 3, he said, gripping the woman's shoulders gently. 1, 2, 3. Nahimana lifted. The muscles in her arms and back bunched with effort. Veins standing out against her skin. The boulder shifted with a grinding sound that made them both freeze. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Royce pulled, dragging the unconscious woman free just as Nahimana's strength gave out and the boulder crashed back down with force that would have crushed anything beneath it. They both sat hard in the dust, breathing heavy. The woman lay between them, alive but damaged in ways that would take time to measure. "Kana," Nahimana said, already moving toward her trapped cousin. "Hold on. We're coming." "No." Royce caught her arm, felt the coiled strength there, the barely controlled panic. "We do this wrong, we kill him. We need the supplies for my pack. We need to think. We don't have time to think. We have exactly enough time to do this right." He stood, pulling her up with him, surprised when she let him. He's stable for now, conscious, talking. That crush injury to his legs, we rush it because bleeding we can't stop. "You know I'm right." She did know. He could see it in her face, in the way her jaw worked as she fought between instinct and intelligence. Finally, she nodded once, sharp and angry. "Get your supplies. Fast." They worked in the gathering darkness, and Royce was struck by how easily they moved around each other, how she anticipated what he needed before he asked, how he understood where she should position herself for maximum leverage. It was like a dance they'd practiced for years instead of improvised in minutes. When they finally freed Kana, his legs were crushed badly enough that Royce knew the recovery would be long and uncertain. But he was alive, and that was something. Nahimana carried her cousin with a gentleness that contradicted everything about her fierce reputation. Royce supported the grandmother, moving slowly through the canyon toward the tribal camp he hadn't known was so close. As they walked, he became aware of eyes in the darkness. Other tribe members watching, judging, measuring this outsider who moved among them. "They'll want you gone," Nahimana said quietly. "Once everyone is stable, they'll demand I send you away. Will you?" She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice carried a weight of realization that changed the texture of the air between them. "I don't know anymore. You saved my family tonight. That creates a debt. I didn't do it for debt." "I know." She adjusted Kana's weight across her shoulders. "That's what makes it complicated." They reached the camp, a cluster of traditional structures mixed with more permanent buildings, all tucked into a protected fold of the canyon. People emerged from shadows, concerned faces turning to shock when they saw Royce. An older man stepped forward, his face carved with age and authority. "Nahimana. What is this?" "This is the man who helped save Kana and grandmother." She hesitated, and Royce realized she'd never asked his name. "This is someone whose mother was saved by grandmother years ago." The old man's eyes moved from Nahimana to Royce and back again. "We don't allow outsiders here." "He's already here," Nahimana said, her voice taking on an edge Royce recognized as defensive. And grandmother needs medical attention he knows how to give. We can discuss rules after we discuss survival. Royce watched the silent battle of wills between Nahimana and the elder. Watched the way tribe members shifted uneasily, caught between gratitude and distrust. He understood suddenly that his presence here wasn't just breaking Nahimana's personal rules about men and strength. It was breaking something much bigger. The boundary she'd spent years reinforcing between her people and the outside world that kept trying to destroy them. One night, the elder said finally, "You tend the wounded. Then you leave before dawn. And you never speak of this place to anyone." Agreed, Royce said before Nahimana could complicate things. But as they carried the injured into a structure lit with low firelight, as he worked beside Nahimana through the night cleaning wounds and setting bones and mixing medicines from his pack with herbs she provided, he knew that one night wouldn't be enough. Not nearly enough to understand the woman beside him, whose hands could break bones or bind them with equal skill. Not enough to figure out why being near her made his chest feel too tight and too open at the same time. And definitely not enough to prepare for what the morning would demand of both of them. Dawn broke cold and unforgiving across the canyon rim. Royce hadn't slept. He'd spent the night monitoring Kana's breathing, checking the grandmother's pupils every hour, adjusting bandages, mixing fresh poultices from the herbs Nahimana brought him. She hadn't slept either. He'd watched her move between family members, her face carefully blank, but her hands gentle in ways that contradicted everything about her public persona. Now, as pale light filtered through the structure's entrance, he heard voices outside. Angry voices. He leaves now, before full sunrise. That was the elder from last night, the one whose authority clearly held weight here. Grandmother is still unconscious. Kana has fever. Nahimana's voice, controlled but strained. They need continued care. Then you provide it. You've learned enough from watching him work. I've learned field medicine isn't the same as healing knowledge. I can set bones. I can't predict if infection will set in or if grandmother's head injury will. Enough. The elder's voice cut through her protest. This man sees our camp, our numbers, our vulnerabilities. Every moment he stays is a risk we cannot afford. Royce moved to the entrance quietly. The gathered tribe members, maybe 20 in total, stood in a loose semicircle. Nahimana faced them alone, her back straight, her shoulders squared. When she saw him emerge, something flickered across her face. Relief? Frustration? He couldn't tell. "I'll leave," Royce said clearly. "I gave my word. One night. Medical help. Then gone before dawn. I keep my word." The elder nodded with grim satisfaction. "Gather your things." But Nahimana started. "No." Royce met her eyes. Saw the conflict there. "He's right. I've already seen too much. Stayed too long. You can handle the rest." Grandmother needs to stay still. Elevated head. Check her eyes every few hours. Kana needs the leg rewrapped twice daily. The mixture I showed you, applied fresh each time. If fever spikes, use the willow bark tea. Not too strong, or it'll upset his stomach. He was giving her instructions. But what he was really doing was giving her an exit from the impossible choice she'd been about to make. He could see her recognize it. See the gratitude and resentment war across her features. "I'll walk you to the canyon edge," she said stiffly. They gathered his supplies in tense silence, the tribe watching every movement. When Nahimana lifted his heavy medicine packs with ease, an older woman made a small sound of approval. Royce noticed how Nahimana's jaw tightened at that. Even now, even here among her own people, she felt the need to prove her strength. They walked without speaking until the camp disappeared behind canyon curves. Finally alone, except for the echoes of their footsteps, Nahimana stopped. "You didn't have to do that." "Do what?" "Make it easy for me. Let me choose duty over." She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. "Over what?" Royce asked quietly. She turned to face him, and the morning light caught the exhaustion in her face. The strain of holding herself together through a night of fear for her family. "Over wanting you to stay." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Royce felt something in his chest crack open. Felt the careful distance he'd been maintaining crumble, like dried clay. "I don't want to leave," he said, the truth surprising him with its intensity. "But those children in the settlement." "I know." She looked away toward the canyon rim where his horse waited. "It's just last night working with you, it felt like," she struggled for words, "like I wasn't alone. Like someone finally understood what it costs to be strong all the time." Royce moved closer, close enough to see the fine lines of fatigue around her eyes, close enough to smell sage and smoke and something uniquelier. "You're not alone. You've never been alone. You have your tribe, your family, who see me as a wall, a barrier, a weapon." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You saw me as a person." His hand lifted almost without conscious thought, hovering near her face, not quite touching. "You are a person, a remarkable one, strong enough to be gentle when it matters, fierce enough to protect what you love, smart enough to know the difference." Her eyes met his, and he saw something vulnerable there, something she'd probably never let anyone see before. "My grandmother used to say that real strength is knowing when to open your hand and when to make a fist." She was right. I've been making fists for so long, I forgot how to open my hand. She took a shaky breath. "Until last night. Until I watched you with Kana and saw that gentleness isn't weakness." "Nahimana, go." She stepped back, and he watched the walls rebuild in real time across her face. "Go save those children. That's what matters." But Royce didn't move. He stood there, caught in the gravity of her presence, in the impossible choice between two kinds of duty, the one to strangers who needed him, and the one to this woman who'd just shown him a piece of her soul. "If I go now, I won't make it in time," he said slowly, thinking out loud. "I lost a night. The direct route through here was supposed to save me 2 days. Going around now means at least 4 more days of travel." Nahimana's expression shifted. "You're saying the children might not." "The fever I described. The symptoms. Maybe 5, 6 days before," he didn't finish. "Didn't need to." She looked toward the canyon passage, the route she'd been guarding for months, the sacred ground she'd sworn to protect. Then she looked at him, and he saw her make a decision that would change everything. "Then I'm coming with you." "What?" "Through the canyon. I'll guide you through the fastest route. Paths only tribe members know. We can cut a full day off the journey." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "But I come with you. I see where you're going. I verify these sick children exist. And I make sure you keep your word about never revealing this place. Your tribe won't allow. My tribe doesn't control me." Fire lit her eyes. "I'm not some possession they get to dictate terms to. If I choose to ensure an outsider honors his agreement by accompanying him, that's my choice to make." Royce studied her face, looking for hidden motives, finding only fierce determination and something else. Maybe hope, maybe curiosity, maybe the same pull he felt toward her. "It'll be dangerous, not just to travel. The settlement might not welcome you. I'm not asking for welcome. I'm asking if you trust me enough to let me come." The question cut deeper than geography or logistics. She was asking if he saw her as threat or ally, as weapon or partner, as the wall her tribe needed or the person she'd shown him she could be. "I trust you," he said, and meant it completely. She nodded once, decisive. "Then we leave within the hour. I need to tell the elder, gather supplies, make sure someone else knows how to care for Kana and grandmother." As she turned to head back to camp, Royce caught her wrist gently. She stopped, looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen how fast I make you travel." But there was a smile in her voice, small and uncertain and absolutely devastating. And Royce realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that this journey was going to test more than their endurance. It was going to test every assumption they'd made about strength, about trust, and about what it meant to let someone pass the walls you'd built to survive. The argument with the elder had been brutal and brief. Nahimana stood in the center of camp, her few belongings already packed, facing down the man who'd helped raise her after her grandmother had taken on that role. His weathered face was tight with anger and something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "You would abandon your duty for a stranger," he demanded. "I would honor my grandmother's memory by ensuring medicine reaches children who need it, just as she would have done." Nahimana's voice remained steady. "And I would protect our location by making certain this man keeps his word." "You protect our location by keeping outsiders away, not by traveling with them. He already knows where we are. The only thing I can control now is what he does with that knowledge." She adjusted the pack on her shoulder. "I'll return in 6 days. Maybe 7. Kana and grandmother will be stable by then." "And if you don't return?" The question hung heavy. Nahimana met the elder's eyes without flinching. "Then you'll know I died keeping our people safe. Isn't that what you raised me to do?" She walked away before he could respond, before the guilt could sink hooks deep enough to hold her. Royce waited beyond the camp perimeter with both horses, his expression neutral, but his eyes seeing too much, as always. "Rough?" he asked as she approached. "I'll survive." They rode in silence through the canyon, Nahimana leading on a path that required single-file navigation through spaces so narrow Royce had to turn sideways in the saddle. The rock walls rose on either side like the ribs of some ancient giant, casting them in perpetual shadow. She moved with absolute confidence through the maze, never hesitating at the forks and splits that would have lost him within minutes. After 2 hours, the canyon opened into a valley Royce had never known existed. A hidden stretch of grassland fed by an underground spring, lush and green in defiance of the harsh desert beyond. "We'll water the horses here," Nahimana said, dismounting with fluid ease. "Then we head northeast through the ridge passage. That's the route that saves us a day." Royce slid from his saddle, his legs stiff from the tense navigation. He watched Nahimana lead the horses to the spring, noticed how she checked each animal's legs and hooves with practiced care before letting them drink. Everything she did carried that same quality: strength tempered by attention, power softened by knowledge. "You're staring," she said without turning around. "Observing. Is there a difference?" "Usually, no. With you, maybe." He moved closer, crouching to splash water on his face. The cold shocked his skin awake. "I'm trying to figure out how someone so strong ended up so isolated." Her face closed immediately. "I'm not isolated. I have my tribe. You have people you protect. That's not the same as having people who know you." He straightened, water dripping from his jaw. "Last night you said I saw you as a person. That means most people don't, including your own tribe. They see what they need to see. What about what you need?" The question clearly caught her off guard. She stared at him for a long moment, something working behind her eyes. "What I need doesn't matter. My tribe needs a defender. That's what I am. That's what you do. It's not what you are. You don't know what I am." "Then tell me." Royce took a step closer, drawn by the same pull that had been growing since he'd first seen her. "We've got a 2-day ride ahead of us. Plenty of time for you to explain why being strong means being alone." Nahimana's hands curled into fists at her sides. That automatic response to discomfort, that instinct to fight rather than feel. But then, slowly, deliberately, she opened them. Royce watched the gesture, recognized it as the enormous act of courage it was. "When I was 16, she said quietly, "I was smaller than the boys my age. Weaker. They never let me forget it. So I trained. I pushed myself until my muscles burned and my hands bled and I could outlast any of them. I got strong because I had to, not because I wanted to. And then I became the strongest. And suddenly everyone wanted me to use that strength for them. Protect them. Fight for them. Be their wall against everything that scared them." Her voice held old bitterness. "No one asked if I was tired, if I wanted something different. They just needed me to be strong. So that's what I became." "That's what you became for them," Royce corrected gently. "But who are you when no one's watching? When you don't have to be anyone's wall?" She looked away toward the ridge line where their path continued. "I don't know anymore. Maybe I never knew." The admission cost her. Royce could see it in the tension of her shoulders, the way she held herself as if expecting punishment for weakness. He wanted to tell her that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that letting walls down took more strength than keeping them up. But he'd learned that some truths people had to discover for themselves. Instead, he said, "Then maybe this journey is a chance to find out." She met his eyes again, and something in her expression shifted. Not softening exactly, but opening, like a door unlocking after years of being barred shut. "Is that what you did? After your mother died? After your sister? Did you find out who you were when you stopped being the person grief made you?" The question hit with surprising accuracy. Royce felt his own walls rattle, felt the careful distance he maintained threatened by her perception. "I'm still figuring that out," he admitted. "At least you're honest about it. Seems like the least I can do when you're being honest with me." They stood there in the hidden valley, horses drinking peacefully behind them, the spring bubbling its endless song into stone. The moment stretched, charged with possibility and risk in equal measure. "We should keep moving," Nahimana said finally. But she didn't move. "We should," Royce agreed. "Also not moving." Royce. His name in her mouth sounded different than when others said it. Rougher. More real. "Yeah. If this goes badly, if the settlement rejects us, if my tribe refuses to take me back, if those children—" She stopped, started again. "I need you to know that I chose this. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to." "Why?" She held his gaze steadily. "Because, for the first time in years, someone looked at me and didn't see a weapon. You saw a person who was tired of fighting alone. And I wanted to find out what happens if I stop fighting for just a little while." Royce felt something shift in his chest, something that had been locked tight for the 2 years since he'd buried his mother suddenly coming loose. "You don't have to fight alone anymore. Not for these next few days, anyway. Is that a promise?" "That's a fact." The smile she gave him was small and uncertain, but it transformed her face in ways that made his breath catch. He'd thought her beautiful in her strength, intimidating in her power. But this vulnerability wrapped in courage, this woman choosing to trust despite every reason not to, this was something beyond beauty. This was connection. "Come on," she said, the moment breaking as she moved toward the horses. "If we're going to save those children, we need to reach the ridge passage before nightfall. The path gets dangerous after dark." The ridge passage was worse than Royce had imagined. Not dangerous in the way of rockslides or predators, but dangerous in the way of exhaustion. Narrow paths that required constant attention. Steep climbs that tested the horse's endurance. Thin air that made every breath feel insufficient. They'd been climbing for 6 hours when Nahimana's horse stumbled. The animal caught itself, but the momentary loss of footing on the rocky path sent stones cascading down the slope. Nahimana dismounted immediately, running her hands down the horse's front leg with focused intensity. "Strained," she said, her jaw tight. "Not serious yet, but it will be if we push her further today." Royce looked at the sun's position, calculating time and distance. "We're halfway through the passage. Can't camp here. No water, no shelter, too exposed." "I know," frustration clear in every line of her body. "But I won't blame her to meet a deadline. I wasn't suggesting we should." He dismounted, assessing their options. "We double up on my horse for the rest of the passage. Let yours unburdened. It'll be slower, at maybe 3 hours. But we'll make the far side by dark." Nahimana looked at his horse, then at him. Royce saw her working through the logistics and the implications. 2 people, 1 horse. Hours of riding with bodies pressed together. The practical necessity warring with the awareness that had been building between them since the valley. "Unless you have a better idea," he added quietly. "I don't." She gathered her horse's reins, redistributing packs to lighten the animal's load. "Your horse strong enough to carry us both?" "He's carried heavier through worse." Royce secured the medicine packs carefully. "Question is whether you're comfortable with it." She met his eyes directly. "I've done harder things than share a saddle." But when she mounted behind him minutes later, arms wrapping around his waist for balance, Royce felt her tension through every point of contact. She held herself carefully, trying to minimize touch, trying to maintain some boundary between them. It lasted maybe 10 minutes before the terrain forced her closer, forced her to trust his balance, forced her body against his back as they navigated narrow turns and steep inclines. "You're going to break a rib holding yourself that stiff," Royce said over his shoulder. "I'm fine. You're rigid as steel. If the horse shifts suddenly, you'll throw us both." He felt her start to argue. Cut it off. "Nahimana, I'm not going to read anything into this that isn't there. You can relax." Slowly, incrementally, he felt her ease. Her arms settled more naturally around him. Her body curved against his back, finding the rhythm of the horse's movement rather than fighting it. And despite his words about not reading anything into it, Royce was acutely aware of every breath she took, every small adjustment, the warmth of her spreading through his shirt. "Can I ask you something?" Her voice came close to his ear, sending awareness down his spine. "Sure. Why haven't you settled somewhere? Built something permanent? You move like a man who's been running for a long time." The observation cut close. "Maybe I have been." "From what?" He was quiet for a long moment, guiding the horse around a particularly narrow section before answering. "From standing still long enough to feel everything I lost. Moving had purpose. Bring supplies here, medicine there, help where it's needed. Standing still just meant remembering. And now I'm starting to think maybe some things are worth standing still for." He felt her breath catch, felt her arms tighten just slightly around him. "Royce, you asked," he said, keeping his tone light despite the weight of what he wasn't saying directly. "Your turn. Why did you really come with me? The truth this time. Not the excuse about making sure I keep my word." She was silent, so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the wind. "Because I was tired of being strong alone. Because when you looked at me, I felt seen instead of used. Because for the first time in years, I wanted something for myself instead of just doing what others needed. And what do you want?" "I don't know yet." Her forehead rested briefly against his shoulder blade. A gesture of trust so simple and profound it made his chest ache. "But I think I want to find out." They rode in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that came from understanding. From two people who'd spent so long carrying weight alone that sharing it felt like relief. The passage opened onto a downward slope just as the sun began its descent. A valley spread below them, harsh and real, with a creek cutting through scrub grass and scattered trees providing sparse shade. "We camp there," Nahimana said, pointing to a cluster of rocks near the water. "Protected from wind, close to water, good visibility." They made camp efficiently. Years of solo travel making them both competent at the necessary tasks. But there was new awareness in how they moved around each other. Nahimana handing him things before he asked. Royce anticipating where she'd need space. Both of them careful not to let the earlier intimacy of shared riding translate into assumption. As darkness fell and they sat on opposite sides of the fire, Nahimana broke the silence. "Tomorrow we reach the settlement. If we leave at dawn, by afternoon. Then we see if we got here in time. We see if the medicine works. We see if they accept help from an Apache woman. And if they don't, then they're fools. And we help anyway." She smiled at that. Small and tired, but genuine. "You make it sound simple." It is simple. What's right isn't always what's easy, but it's always simple. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "My mother used to say that complexity is just an excuse for not doing what you know you should. Your mother was wise." She was. And she'd have liked you. Nahimana's eyebrows rose. "Why?" "Because you're exactly the kind of strong she believed in. The kind that knows when to fight and when to heal." He looked up from the fire, caught her gaze, and held it. "The kind that takes more courage than most people understand." She stared at him for a long moment, something working in her expression that he couldn't quite read. Then she stood abruptly, moving to her bedroll. We should sleep. Long day tomorrow. But as Royce lay down on his own side of the fire, listening to the creak and the night sounds, he heard her voice drift across the darkness. Thank you. For what? For making me feel like maybe I'm more than just what I can fight. He wanted to tell her she was so much more, wanted to list every way she'd surprised and impressed, and moved him over the past 2 days. Instead, he said simply, "You don't have to thank me for seeing what's already there." Silence settled over the camp, but it was charged with possibility, with the sense that whatever they found in the settlement tomorrow, whatever happened after this journey ended, something between them had shifted into territory neither could map yet. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Something that felt even more dangerously close to the kind of connection that changed everything. The settlement wasn't what Nahimana expected. She'd pictured something rough and temporary. Canvas structures and desperate faces. Instead, they rode into a collection of permanent buildings arranged around a central square. Small, isolated, but established. People moved between structures with the efficiency of routine until they spotted the riders. Then everything stopped. Royce felt Nahimana stiffen behind him on the horse. "Easy," he murmured. "Let me talk first." A man emerged from the largest building, his face weathered and suspicious. Behind him, others gathered. Maybe 30 people total, watching with expressions that ranged from curiosity to hostility. Nahimana's Apache clothing made her impossible to mistake for anything else. "Royce Barrett," the man said, recognition clearing some of the suspicion. "Wasn't sure you'd make it. Had help." Royce dismounted, turned to help Nahimana down, though she clearly didn't need it. "This is Nahimana. She guided me through passages that saved us 2 days. Without her, I wouldn't have gotten here in time." The man's eyes moved from Royce to Nahimana and back again. "Apache." "Yes," Nahimana said clearly, meeting his stare without flinching. "Apache. And if your children are sick with the fever Royce described, they don't care who brings the medicine that saved them." A woman pushed through the crowd, her face drawn with exhaustion and fear. "My daughter is burning up. My son stopped eating yesterday. I don't care if help comes from an Apache or the devil himself. I just want my children to live." The tension shifted. The man who'd first spoken, clearly some kind of leader, looked between the desperate mother and Nahimana's unwavering stance. "The medicine is what we need, but we don't need trouble." "Then don't create it," Royce said quietly, an edge entering his voice. "We're here to help. That's all. Show us the sick." They were led to a building that had been converted into a makeshift infirmary. 6 children lay on beds, ranging from maybe 4 years old to early teens. The smell hit Nahimana immediately. Fever, sweat, sickness, fear. She'd smelled it before in her own camp, recognized the particular quality of illness that could turn deadly without intervention. Royce moved among the children quickly, checking pulses, skin temperature, looking at eyes, listening to breathing. Nahimana watched him work, saw the practiced competence, the gentle way he spoke to scared children and exhausted parents. "It's the fever, I thought," he said finally, looking at Nahimana. "We need to prepare the medicine. Get it into them before nightfall. They're further along than I hoped. Tell me what you need." They worked side by side, Royce mixing his brought medicines with boiled water, Nahimana holding children still when they threshed, helping reluctant parents understand dosages and timing. She felt eyes on her constantly. The settlement people watching this Apache woman touch their children, help their families, work alongside Royce with an ease that spoke of practice. One mother, the desperate woman from earlier, approached Nahimana while Royce was across the room. "Why are you helping us?" Nahimana looked up from the child she was cooling with damp cloths. "Because they need help. Does there need to be another reason? Your people and our people, we're not exactly friends." "No," Nahimana agreed. "We're not. But your children aren't your people or my people. They're just children. And I've watched children burn with fever before. I know what it costs." She resumed the cooling process, her large hands surprisingly gentle. "I know what it costs to watch someone die when you couldn't save them. The mother's expression softened slightly. You've lost someone. Everyone has lost someone. Nahimina's voice remained steady, but something in it made the woman reach out, just briefly touching her arm in wordless understanding. As the sun set, Royce pulled Nahimana aside. There's a problem. The medicine isn't working. The medicine will work, but it takes time. They need monitoring through the night. Temperatures checked. Doses adjusted. Fluids maintained. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I can handle 3, maybe 4 children. But 6, with their conditions this advanced? I need help. Skilled help. I can help. I know you can. But, he gestured toward the settlement people watching them with continued wariness. They're accepting your presence because I vouched for you. Actually trusting you with their children's lives through the night is different. Nahimana felt old anger rise. The familiar frustration of being judged for who she was rather than what she could do. But then she remembered what Royce had told her about strength. Real strength wasn't forcing people to accept her. Real strength was proving her worth through action, not intimidation. Then I'll prove I can be trusted, she said simply. She turned back to the infirmary, approached the settlement leader, who'd challenged them initially. Your people don't trust me. I understand why. But those children need help through the night that one man can't provide alone. So here's what I propose. You, or anyone you choose, stays in this room with us, watches everything I do, questions every action. The moment you think I'm a threat to these children, you stop me. But let me help save them. The man studied her for a long moment. Why? Why do you care about our children? Because caring about children shouldn't require a reason beyond them being children. She met his eyes steadily. Because your fear of me doesn't change what's right. And because if I were in your position, I'd want someone strong enough to help, regardless of where they came from. Strong enough. The man's mouth quirked slightly. You're certainly that. Strength isn't just about fighting. My grandmother taught me that. Nahimana gestured to the sick children. Let me show you what real strength looks like. The man looked at Royce, who nodded. Finally he sighed. I'll stay. I'll watch. But the first sign of won't come, Nahimana interrupted. I give you my word. Through the long night, Nahimana worked alongside Royce with a focus that shut out everything except the children's needs. She learned to read the subtle signs he looked for. The quality of breathing, the dampness of skin, the responsiveness of eyes. When a young boy started seizing from high fever, she was the one who held him steady while Royce administered emergency measures. Her strength used not to harm, but to prevent harm. The settlement leader, a man named Thomas, watched it all. Watched how Nahimana's large hands could be gentle with fragile children. Watched how she anticipated Royce's needs. How they communicated in shorthand built from 2 days of learning each other's methods. Watched how she sang quietly in Apache to soothe a crying girl. The melody soft and surprisingly sweet. By midnight, 2 of the children showed clear improvement. By pre-dawn, 4 were sleeping naturally instead of tossing in fever. The last 2, the youngest and the sickest, remained critical but stable. Royce sat heavily on a chair, exhaustion written across his face. We might have gotten here in time. Might? Thomas asked. These 2. Royce gestured to the youngest children. Next 12 hours will tell. If the fever breaks by noon, they'll survive. If it doesn't, he didn't finish. Nahimana stood by the window, watching dawn paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. She felt Royce come up beside her, felt his presence like warmth. You were right, Thomas said from behind them. Both turned. The settlement leader looked tired but honest. About strength. About what matters. I was wrong to judge you by who your people are instead of who you are. You are protecting your own, Nahimana said. I understand that. I'd do the same. Maybe that's a problem, Thomas replied quietly. All of us so busy protecting our own that we forget we're all just people trying to survive. As morning light filled the infirmary, the youngest child, a girl of maybe 5, opened her eyes clearly for the first time in days. Her mother sobbed with relief. Within an hour, The last critical child also showed signs of fever breaking. They'd done it. Against time and distance and odds, they'd saved 6 children who would have died otherwise. Royce found Nahimana outside later, watching the settlement wake to a new day. "You were extraordinary in there. I just did what needed doing. That's what makes it extraordinary." He stood beside her, close but not touching. "You showed them that strength isn't about intimidation. It's about showing up when it matters and doing the hard work that saves lives." She turned to face him, and the morning light caught in her eyes, turning them warm amber. "I learned that from watching you. You never once tried to prove you were strong enough to match me physically. You just proved you were strong enough to stand beside me anyway." The words hung between them, charged with everything they discovered over the past 3 days about strength, about trust, about what it meant to truly see another person. "Nahimana," Roy started. But before he could finish, Thomas approached. "The children are stable. You're both free to rest, or to leave if you need to get back to your tribe." The reminder hit like cold water. The tribe. The elder. The choice she'd made that had consequences waiting back in the canyon. And Royce's mission was complete. The children were saved. His purpose fulfilled. Which meant this journey that had changed everything was over. Unless they chose something different. They left the settlement at midday with the gratitude of 30 people who'd learned that prejudice was a luxury sick children couldn't afford. The ride back was quieter than the journey there had been. Not uncomfortable, but weighted with awareness that every mile brought them closer to decisions neither wanted to face. Nahimana rode her own horse again. The animal's leg recovered enough for light travel, and the distance between them felt both necessary and unbearable. "You'll go back to your tribe," Royce said finally, breaking the silence as they paused to water the horses near the hidden valley where they'd camped before. "I have to. Kana and my grandmother, they need continued care. The elder needs to know I kept my word." She dismounted, not looking at him. "And you'll continue moving, bringing medicine where it's needed, helping where you can." That was the plan. Royce climbed down from his saddle, moved to stand near her, not touching, but close enough that the space between them felt charged. "I'm tired of running, Nahimana. Tired of moving, so I don't have to feel what I've lost. These past days with you, I felt something I thought died with my mother. Purpose that isn't just distraction. Connection that isn't just obligation." She turned to face him, and he saw the conflict in her eyes. Want warring with duty. Hope fighting with fear. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe it's time I stopped running. Found a place to stand still for a while." He took a breath, steadying himself. "Near your canyon, maybe. Close enough to help when needed. Far enough to respect boundaries. There are other settlements in this territory that need supplies. Need medicine. Need someone who knows how to move through harsh country. You'd stay in this region. If you wanted me to. If you thought," he stopped, started again more honestly. "I've watched you be strong for everyone else for days now. Let me be strong enough to stand beside you. Not to protect you, you don't need that, but to share the weight when it gets too heavy to carry alone." Nahimana felt something crack in her chest. Felt the walls she'd built over years begin to crumble in a way that was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "I spent my whole life proving no man was strong enough for me. I built that identity, that reputation. What happens if I let it go?" "You don't have to let it go. You just have to add something to it." Royce moved closer, close enough now that she could see the hope and fear reflected in his expression. Could see that he was just as vulnerable in this moment as she was. "You're still the strongest person I've ever met. But maybe you don't have to be strong alone anymore. Maybe that's what real strength looks like. Knowing when to let someone in." "And what do you get out of this?" Her voice came out rough. "Why would you give up moving freely to stay near someone who's more comfortable fighting than anything else?" "Because when I look at you, I don't see someone who's comfortable fighting. I see someone who learned to fight because that's what survival demanded. I see someone who wants permission to be more than just a wall." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, and took her hand. His fingers looked small against hers, but his grip was steady. I see someone worth standing still for, worth building something with, if she'll have me. Nahimana looked down at their joined hands, her scarred, calloused fingers wrapped around his. She thought about her grandmother, who taught her that real strength was knowing when to fight and when to heal. She thought about the past 3 days, about working beside Royce to save children, about feeling seen instead of used, about discovering that vulnerability could be power instead of weakness. I told my tribe I was going to ensure you kept your word about never revealing our location, she said quietly. I told myself that was the reason I came with you. What was the real reason? I wanted to find out who I was when I wasn't being everyone's weapon. I wanted to see if maybe, somewhere under all this strength I built to survive, there was someone who could just be. She looked up, met his eyes. You showed me that person exists. That she's not weaker than the warrior everyone else needs. Just different. And she took a breath. And I don't want to go back to being only a weapon. I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone, proving I don't need anyone. She squeezed his hand. But I can't abandon my tribe either. They need protection. They need someone who can protect them without destroying herself in the process. Royce interrupted gently. Someone who knows that taking care of herself isn't selfishness. That accepting help isn't weakness. Is that what you'd be? Help. I'd be whatever you need me to be. Partner. Friend. Someone who understands that loving someone strong doesn't mean trying to make them weak. It means being strong enough to stand beside them. The word hung between them. Loving. Neither had said it directly before, but there it was. Simple and true and terrifying. I don't know how to do this, Nahimana admitted. How to be someone's partner. How to let someone see me as more than just strength. Neither do I, Royce said honestly. But I'm willing to figure it out if you are. She studied his face. The scars. The sadness that still lived in his eyes. The steadiness that had never wavered, even when facing her at her most intimidating. She thought about what he'd said days ago about his mother believing complexity was just an excuse for not doing what you knew you should. This was simple, really. Scary. Uncertain. Risky. But simple. She wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted the possibility of being more than just what everyone else needed her to be. Okay, she said, the word coming out stronger than she felt. Okay. You stay near the canyon. You help the settlements in this region. I protect my tribe and learn how to stop using strength as armor. She took a shaky breath. And we figure out what it means to be strong together instead of strong alone. Together, Royce repeated, and the smile that crossed his face was like sunrise after a long, dark night. He pulled her closer, and she let him. Let herself be held by someone whose strength wasn't about dominating, but about supporting. When he kissed her, it was gentle and fierce and full of promise. The kind that said this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Nahimana laughed. A sound she couldn't remember making in years. My tribe is going to think I've lost my mind. Maybe you have. Maybe we both have. Royce grinned. But I'd rather be crazy with you than sane and alone. They rode back to the canyon together as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. When they reached the tribal camp, the elder met them with suspicion that softened into surprise when he saw how Nahimana carried herself. Still strong, still capable, but with something new in her expression, something that looked like peace. The children, the elder asked. Saved. All of them. Nahimana dismounted, helped Royce with the packs. And I've decided Royce will be staying in this region. He'll help settlements, bring medicine, trade fairly with us when we need supplies. You trust him? Nahimana looked at Royce, who waited quietly, letting her handle her tribe her way. I trust him. More than that, I choose him. As partner, as ally, as someone who showed me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. The elder studied them both for a long moment. Finally he nodded. Your grandmother would approve. She always said you'd find your balance when you met someone who could match your strength without trying to break it. As the sun set over the canyon, Nahimana stood beside Royce, his hand in hers, and realized the title she'd worn for years. The woman no man was strong enough for hadn't been wrong. It had just been incomplete. She'd needed someone strong enough not to compete with her strength, but to complement it. Someone who saw her power and matched it with his own kind of courage. The courage to be vulnerable, to stay instead of run, to build instead of just survive. She'd spent years saying no man was strong enough for her. She'd been right, until she met the one who was. If you enjoyed this story of strength, vulnerability, and finding someone who sees you for who you truly are, click the video on your screen right now to watch another unforgettable tale. And if this story moved you, if it made you think differently about what real strength looks like, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We bring you stories like this every week, tales of people who defied expectations, who chose connection over isolation, who learned that being strong enough sometimes means being brave enough to let someone in. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, remember, true strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to let the right person stand with you.